Hello, and welcome to AP Taylor Swift,
the podcast for Swifties who love to overanalyze lyrics. We're your hosts.
I'm Jen.
I'm Jody.
And I'm Monty.
And we're your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift. Hello, and welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift. This week, we are doing a show and tell episode on the topic of luxury, which is a broad topic that I have a feeling we will all have interpreted slightly differently with our songs that we picked. But before we get into those songs, Jody, do you want to give us an overview of this topic, why it's a theme we care about or find interesting?
Yeah, it's a broad topic because there's many different ways you can interpret it. In literature, luxury shows up as a marker of social status. It's used for writers and authors to explore themes like human desire, morality, identity. So in The Great Gatsby, for example, luxury is used to really signify and signal the class divide and as a means of social commentary. We also see social commentary and luxury come up a lot in Jane Austen's work. Really, again, luxury there highlighting economic disparity, the barriers between social classes. But also sometimes you'll see luxury used to signify the emptiness of materialism. Think the picture of Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde, which we talked about in our aestheticism episode, I believe. So exploring how luxury sometimes fails to satisfy these deeper human needs and deeper human desires. You often will also see luxury show up as a means of examining like performativeness. So maintaining appearances, curating a careful image. And then also in literature, and we actually see this in Taylor's work a lot, the golden cage metaphor of exploring how luxury can really trap you as opposed to liberate you. So the privileged characters are often the ones who are most isolated, celebrities who feel like they can't escape public scrutiny, just showing that wealth and luxury doesn't always solve your problems, that you can have everything in the world and still feel lonely and have nothing. So I think there's a lot of different ways that luxury shows up in literature. And to your point, Jen, I'm sure we will see it show up in many ways in the songs that we've picked today.
This is a spoiler, but you basically quoted the line from Elizabeth Taylor, what could you possibly get for the girl who has everything and nothing all at once?
I wonder if that will come up.
Maybe it will, but as you were saying it, I was like,
intrigued.
wait, that is basically the lyric.
Yes. I have the first song. I picked I Bet You Think About Me. This came out on Red, Taylor's version. It's a From the Vault track that came out in 2021. Written by Taylor Swift and Lori McKenna. It was likely written much earlier. Red came out in 2012, so this song was probably written 2010, 2011, but we didn't get it until we got the Vault tracks from Red Taylor's version. And I picked this song because the signifiers of luxury are really about class commentary, and I liked the way luxury is used in this song to contrast the speaker's experience from the ex-boyfriend and to really kind of put the ex-boyfriend down. And I feel like this is a good example of money can't buy you everything. So the song, if you haven't heard it, or if you haven't watched the music video, which is also now iconic, really contrasts the speaker's farm-raised living room dancing and kitchen table bills upbringing. So like a much more, normal, everyday upbringing with her ex's Silver Spoon gated community and Beverly Hills lifestyle. So really using luxury to highlight the social class differences between her and her ex and painting the luxurious life as largely negative. Because despite having all of these things, I bet you think about me. That's the purpose or like the crux of the song. So luxury here represents a couple things. It represents the social barriers that doomed the relationship. So she sings, I tried to fit in with your upper crust circles. She also sings, you grew up in a Silver Spoon gated community, glamorous, shiny, bright Beverly Hills. So again, that contrast between you have that person's like luxurious life with I was raised on a farm. No, it wasn't a mansion, just living room dancing and kitchen table bills. So you have, again, the social class divide. But then that goes into, but you know what they say, you can't help who you fall for. So like this despite our differences, you can't help who you fall for. You laughed at my dreams, rolled your eyes at my jokes. And again, the whole song is like, you have all this stuff, and I bet you think about me, that no matter what you have, I'm still on your mind. You don't have everything because you don't have me. So we also have luxury as performative versus authentic. So there's a verse where he says, chasing make believe status. The last time you felt free was when none of that shit mattered because you were with me. So again, luxury and status are inauthentic and don't really matter. They're not giving you everything that you had because you're missing me. And then she also uses, I mean, this whole song is very comedic. I have a quote somewhere, read a quote somewhere that when she was writing this with Laurie McKenna, she wanted it to be kind of like a drinking song and more of a comedic take on that really an ex relationship, as opposed to some of the more very serious, very dramatic and traumatic breakup songs on Red. So here she kind of like uses luxury as like this comedic deflation of luxury that, again, you're the one who doesn't have anything. I bet you think about me in your house with your organic shoes and your $1 million couch, that you're like, here you are on this like epitome of unattainable things that, you think mean you make it and that you have everything. And no, I bet you think about me.
Yeah, you're missing the most important thing.
Yeah. The thing that money can't buy is me.
Another thing in this too that as I was reading through, thought was really interesting is the line, and the girl in your bed has a fine pedigree.
Yeah.
Pedigree is such an interesting word choice there, because nowadays we primarily use that for dogs or animals in particular.
Yes.
And if you want to go back to when it was about actual like ancestry, that was more commonly used a while ago, when a woman with a fine pedigree was an ornament to your own social standing, that you had to marry a woman who had a fine enough ancestry that it
the
would
Jane
be,
Austen.
Yeah, it would be a boon to your social standing to have the ornament of a beautiful woman with a fine pedigree on your arm.
And also I think to your lineage, there's something about breeding of like breeding with the right caliber of person, which I will talk about a little bit more in my song too.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, but still deep in a way. I guess like the way she's using luxury to create the contrast.
It's really interesting the way that she's using luxury here, and I'm glad you did this one, because this is on the other side where she is the simple life, so to speak, and the other person is the one who's coming from luxury. This song was also written really earlier in her discography, which was important. You called it out earlier. And some of the other songs that we do are from later in her lifetime, and she obviously accumulated a lot of wealth in that time period. So it's just really interesting to hear how that perspective maybe can be done on both sides. It's not even that the perspective changes, but like there's luxury in simplicity, and then there's luxury in other means for other purposes as well.
I think even beyond that, she's also contrasting the pedigree, the way they grew up. So even though we now know she has a lot now, she's can also have $1 million couch and organic shoes.
Sure.
Just contrasting how you were raised, right? Your background, your the social class that you came from. And that doesn't change. And that, particularly in literature, to your point, Jen, is often used as a marker of who are you and what are you value, what's your value and what's your worth, right? The old money versus new money debate in The Great Gatsby, right? Like that no matter how much money Gatsby has, he'll always be new money. That's so that's so like, that's not good enough. And so again, I think there's just such nuances to this theme of luxury that if you're just looking at the surface can seem really glamorous and lovely, but she's using it in a really nuanced and dynamic way, which is really fun.
Well, and the phrase silver spoon has like a storied history that goes to the way you're being raised. Historically, a silver spoon was a literal gift. So silver was expensive. It was hard to get in the Middle Ages. And so wealthy families, often a godparent, would gift a silver spoon to the baby to signify wealth, to signify health, all of that. But it was a literal, like, it's a luxury to have silver. So to give a small spoon to an infant that can't use it is symbolically wealthy, and also literally required wealth and luxury to be able to make a purchase like that, when most common people were just, I mean, the Middle Ages weren't always as bad as the culture likes to make it out to be, but for the most part, if you had a baby in the Middle Ages, you were focusing on keeping it alive. You weren't trying to put a little unusable spoon as a gift to it. Like, that's like some wealthy people nonsense.
Well, let's move on to the next song then. I'm doing Bejeweled. It came out on midnight in 2022, and it's written by Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff. We do have quite a bit of a time jump here, not so much from the Volt track release, but definitely from when we suspect this song would have been written. And I think something that jumps out to me right away is that here, I think this song is also to some degree about your worth. I think the first song kind of was also about that. It's like, what really defines your worth? Does it have to be the money, or can it be something else? And I think this song also is about worth. But in this song, she's really using gemstones and jewelry and luxury as a way to represent her worth. So even though we don't actually know, I think, in my opinion, and we have hints that this person, the speaker here, is really well off, and I'll point some of those out. But I think that part is almost secondary. It doesn't actually matter if the person is actually rich or not. The point is that she is putting on this aura of all of the luxurious things in the world, and she's comparing herself to those rare jewels and gems and saying, like, this is what my worth is, and anybody who doesn't see that doesn't deserve me to some degree. We're not deep diving this, so this is like my quick 2 cents version, but just to go through it a little bit, it opens up just, I think I've been a little too kind, didn't notice you walking all over my peace of mind. So right off the bat, I think there's no jewelry mentioned here. There's no luxury mentioned here. But what is mentioned is my peace of mind. And that's kind of the thing that's at stake. We've heard Taylor in other interviews talk about what her peace of mind is worth and how she really protects that and guards that. But I think there's something right there that we can tie to for the rest of this song of what is the cost of a peace of mind. And when this person has realized that somebody has been walking all over that, then she's going to flip it around and not really take that from this person. It talks about, so this is where the next line, it says, in the shoes I gave you as a present, is our first hint of actual social status or some financial disparity. This idea of giving someone shoes as a present. There's an I and the U. We're not deep diving this, but like right off the bat, you've got two characters and one is gifting something else, something that is typically seen as a luxury item like shoes. And so we've established a little bit of a class divide with that hint. And then once again, we get another like suggestion to peace of mind or worth when someone says putting someone first only works when you're in their top 5. And so this is this idea of ranking, putting someone higher above than others, not directly luxury related, but once again, hinting at worth. And then we get into the chorus, which is where everything really becomes obviously about luxury gemstones. Best believe I'm still bejeweled can mean several things. Quite literally bejeweled, like yours truly today, which is bedecked in stones and gems. But it can also mean I am sparkling, I am bedecked in something of value. I have an aura that is of value. And I think that's it's not just quite literally bejeweled here, it's a metaphor, because then she says, when I walk in the room, I still make the whole place shimmer, and it's about that sparkling quality. In this chorus, there is a line about familiarity breeds contempt. And I love that she used the word breeds. And Jody, like, we started talking about pedigree in your song, but like my thought here was really just when committing to the metaphor, like putting on all the language related to that metaphor. The word breeds is a loaded word when it comes to luxury and jewelry and value, especially when it came to old money. And so I think there's just this use of how you can breed contempt. It almost is just the language is putting her in conversation with a different class of people.
It's so interesting because that's not a word or a phrase in this song that I ever really paid attention to, but you're right in this context.
It's
It
really
says so much
subtle.
more. Yeah.
It's subtle, but it like really like elevates the language that she's using in a second to just like put her up as like, I'm imagining like the grandmother from the Titanic, you know, like all of a sudden you're like, familiarity breeds contempt. And then she says, don't put me in the basement when I want the penthouse of your heart. So once again, you have this visual play on levels, but also you have the contrast economically between a basement, the lowest possible class, and then a penthouse, which is a very expensive luxury. People who live in the penthouse are very well off. To be able to afford the penthouse for anything means you obviously are comfortable and can drop a lot of cash to do that.
Apparently, familiarity breeds contempt is from the Bible, Matthew 13:55.
Oh, I would have never caught that, so I'm glad you
I
looked that
Googled
up.
it. I Googled it.
I feel like that adds even more layers that if we were doing a
Right.
deep dive, we would jump into, but for my purposes today, let's ignore that for the time being. And then, of course, the chorus ends with, I polish up real nice. And this idea of polish, I think the phrase that's really common is I clean, like we clean up nice. And I love that she used the word polish because once again, I think it's putting the conversation, it's changing the conversation into a whole different league. Polishing shoes, polishing jewels, polishing really anything requires a certain level of privilege and class. You have to be able to buy the polish, do like the act of polishing. Sometimes you would hire others to polish. Like it's a loaded term that once again, I just think adds a lot of layers to the statement. And then when you say that, like, I'm polishing up nice, I'm coming off like clean, sparkling, new. That is also something that requires spending money and she's got it all here. The very last thing that I wanted to draw attention to is that there is in the bridge, we have sapphire tears on my face. We have some guy said my aura's moonstone and what's a girl got to do? A diamond's got to shine. We've got 3 different kinds of gemstones that are listed here. And the song is Bejeweled, so we know we're talking about jewels as items of luxuries. But I also, and I would love to do, I'm volunteering for Substack for this because there is a deep history of how wealth was passed down. For women, wealth was accumulated and passed down in the form of gemstones and jewelry, because for the longest time in a lot of cultures, women could not open bank accounts and they didn't have the incomes or whatever, but familial wealth and jewels and gemstones that were passed down was like a real way of accumulating wealth. And I think there's something here about just like listing the specific kind of gemstones like sapphires, moonstones. Moonstones can be on the cheaper side. They can also get very expensive and rare if it's a blue moonstone, for example. Diamonds obviously have this association largely due to marketing, about being sparkly and really valuable and representing rarity. And then sapphires are a very powerful old gem that was regarded in many cultures as just like very beautiful, perfect, and rich. So just by listing this, I think that there's this deep history to these stones, and especially as it pertains to women's worth, that I think is really interesting. And so I like that she listed that here.
I love it, and I love that this is such a different take on luxury than the song that I did, which again, I think is why we love doing these show and tells, because this song to me really doubles down on the exact quote from the New Heights podcast was like, your energy is expensive. And that's like
Yeah.
a great summary of this song. Like, your energy is expensive, and she's showing why her energy is expensive. I'm still bejeweled. I'm sapphire tears, moonstone, my aura's moonstone. I'm a diamond. I have to shine. And I am worthy. I am worth. I am of value.
Yeah,
And clearly there's a situation here where someone is not valuing her the way that she should be valued. And so luxury here is a way to show like, no, I am luxurious. I am worthy.
Yeah, I mean, especially the way that she's used sapphire tears, like to me, that's so loaded as a metaphor. It's
Yeah.
like I cannot waste tears. It's too
Right.
valuable.
Too
like
valuable.
you can
Ooh.
say don't cry over spilled milk or whatever, but like when you say like my tears, literally like every single tear is a sapphire. How many of those are we going to do? But also, how rich do you have to be able to cry sapphires, right? So there's
tears.
this like double thing of just how it's not worth the tears, but also how rich you are as a person that you can have these sapphire tears.
Yeah, I love all of that. I've always thought the historical part of like women needing to have like jewels or something is really interesting. I also was looking it up because you said this at the beginning and I just wanted to confirm it was right. When Taylor was on the New Heights podcast, she specifically says that your energy it's not just expensive. She says it's a luxury that not everyone can afford. And
I didn't realize she specifically used the word luxury.
Yeah,
I love
me
that.
neither.
Great job.
I was like, maybe she did, so I looked it up and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And as a segue, that was her announcement, of course, for The Life of a Showgirl, which is a song I wanted to do today, is from that album, which is Elizabeth Taylor, which came out on The Life of a Showgirl in 2025, written by Taylor Swift, Max Martin, and Shellback. We had a not so subtle foreshadowing at the beginning of this episode, so this is probably not a surprise. And I do also want to preface this by saying we do plan on deep diving this next week because I don't understand the song. I love it, but I don't get it. And so we're just going to spend some time trying to figure it out together. However, luxury is obviously a big theme in this. So the song, I put together the words, the song's central tension. I don't know if it's necessarily the thesis, but I think the tension of the song comes from the line, what could you possibly get for the girl who has everything and nothing all at once, which I think is a lot of the tension that we have seen with luxury so far in this episode, and a lot of the stuff we were saying at the top of like in Great Gatsby. That's the kind of tension you see. What do you do for someone who has everything, but then they have nothing? And in that, the narrator of this song is surrounded by luxury markers. So like Portofino views, Cartier, the best booth at Musso and Frank's, and yet it's clear that the protagonist, the speaker, also feels empty. So that's the everything and nothing all at once. Is that golden cage, these objects, these signifiers of luxury, of wealth, of a good life, and yet feeling empty on the inside. And I think, too, with that, there's a fickleness of these trappings of luxury. And I see that in lines like, you're only as hot as your last hit, baby. And the Elizabeth Taylor reference itself, Elizabeth Taylor, Jody and I were researching this beforehand because she was like, have you looked this up? And I was like, no, I should have. But Elizabeth Taylor had 7 husbands and was one of the most successful female movie stars of all time, was the highest paid movie star of her time. So she also was in this fishbowl of relationships, image, everything she did was commodified, which is very Taylor Swiftian. You can see the connection to it, but it was clear that Elizabeth Taylor had several marriages, was searching for something that all of these trappings of luxury and success and wealth weren't quite hitting for her. And I think there is a question. So I reference a lot of different things about the song, but at the end of the day, I think there's this performativity that goes with it. The song is like dripping with almost flippancy, I think, where none of it is taken seriously. And so there's a question of how serious, which I think we'll get into this in the deep dive, but how serious does the speaker actually take all of this? How much does she believe? She has the line of, I'd give up the Cartier for someone to love. Just kidding. So you kind of go back and forth, but it's clear that there is still a performance happening throughout these lyrics. You even have things like, they say I'm bad news, I just say thanks. So it's this idea of playing with image, of not caring, of not needing anything, of, oh, I'd give up the Cartier for someone to love. Just kidding. I don't even need that. Like, the luxury fits everything I need. Yet at the beginning, we got, what could you possibly get for the girl who has everything and nothing all at once? So I think there is this tension of does she believe what she's saying? Is she performing this? Is she herself caught in the tension of like, I do like this luxury, but is this everything that I need? And going back and forth. And within that, I really thought the line, "You look at me like you're hypnotized," is really interesting too, of the talking about the golden cage. I was also thinking of the barrier of luxury of I have wealth, I have success, I have fame, and that makes me both a commodity, like I'm a commodity for people to ogle at, and then therefore who am I really underneath, going with the old Hollywood. Like if you take off the furs and the jewelry and all the gold rings and everything, who is that person? Who is Elizabeth Taylor? Who is Taylor Swift? And the luxury is a shield and a cage, perhaps at the same time.
There's a really nice connection and parallel to the song that I did, to I Bet You Think About Me, where this Taylor, the speaker, was not the luxurious one, and she was saying, you have everything, and yet you don't have me, so you have nothing. And now she is that person where she's like, she's relating to this person, Elizabeth Taylor, who has everything, and she's like, I have everything and nothing all at once. So it's this really full circle for this podcast moment, or these songs become bookends of experiencing luxury and being on both sides of it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that was literally my first thought as you were talking to Jen, is like, wow, we
did it.
Done a full circle here, haven't we? Like started from like, it's the simple things and I don't quite know how to fit into the luxury, going to like the Bejeweled of like, what is my worth, like what is that, and like I'm using my worth as jewels as a metaphor for my worth, and then coming down here to now saying like, okay, but there's a different side to that as well. It can be both my worth, but it can also be like, maybe I am the luxury, and yet at the same time, what does that mean? There's also a darker side to it. Like everything that you had said, Jody, at the top of this episode about all of the different things luxury symbolizes, like this song hits on all of them. The emptiness, the performative, the golden cage, like all of it.
And yet she still seems to like it some. Like the flippancy is, she's not, it's not the villain of the story, is not all of this luxury. So that's interesting.
I would love to hear you guys' take or view of Elizabeth Taylor. I never grew up with like American movies or Hollywood, and like just culturally, I didn't get exposed to it till very little. And yet even then, what I will say is, because like my parents would still come in contact with American culture from like an international lens. So like if somebody made it to India as an icon, like that was something. And I did know who Elizabeth Taylor was growing up as an icon, even though I've never seen like any of her movies. Maybe I've seen one now. I'd never really seen any of her movies, and I didn't have a lot of that cultural context, but I did equate Elizabeth Taylor always with luxury. I knew exactly what her perfume bottle looked like, and it was called White Diamonds. And I think she actually has like a whole perfume line of gemstone themed perfumes, and like the eyes, her Cleopatra look of like just completely bedecked in like gold and jewels. So even having no context of her as an actress, I very much viewed her as this icon that represented luxury.
Yes.
I'm just curious, like, if you guys have this similar kind of experience, or like what was the perception?
Your perception of Elizabeth Taylor is probably going to be maybe not your daughter's perception of Taylor Swift, but maybe like her daughter's perception of Taylor Swift, because Elizabeth Taylor was basically the Taylor Swift of the early 1960s. She came up in the classic 1950s Hollywood cinema. She started her as a child actress in the 40s. She was one of the most popular classic Hollywood film stars in the 50s, and then she became the world's highest paid movie star in the 60s, and then just remained a huge public figure for the rest of her life. She was one of the last stars of the classic like Hollywood studio system. And, I'm reading from Wikipedia, but she was portrayed as different from, quote, ordinary people, and her public image was carefully crafted and controlled by MGM. When the era of classical Hollywood ended in the 1960s and paparazzi photography became a normal feature of media culture, Taylor came to define a new type of celebrity whose real private life was the focus of public interest. So that's also why, like, some of her celebrity and fame has nothing to do with her movies. It has a lot to do with her private life and how her private life became public interest. My knowledge of Elizabeth Taylor, so I wasn't raised by my grandparents, but my grandmother and grandfather were very big influences in my life, and a lot of my early media consumption was just whatever was my grandmother's favorite thing. So Shirley Temple, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, Singing in the Rain, so, like, all of the cinema and movie and TVs from like the 50s and 60s were the things that I was then raised on as a very young child, which included Elizabeth Taylor. And purple was always my favorite color. And so the thing that always stuck out to me as a very young child was her purple eyes. And so I was like, well, I want to be Elizabeth Taylor. I want purple eyes. But again, to your point, Monty, like, all of that was without ever seeing her films until I was older. So she's a Hollywood legend. And I think she's a Hollywood legend of the type of like Marilyn Monroe, but she didn't die a early tragic death the way that Marilyn Monroe did, which is why
was able to
Marilyn
age.
Monroe has become like mythic almost.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Whereas Elizabeth Taylor died in 2011. So she was a real person to all of us, not just her early like Hollywood career.
But that's like where something about this, and I know we're going to deep dive this later, and so
Yeah, I
our
was gonna say,
conversation
some
is
of
like
this is
getting
like-
a little bit into it. Maybe we'll repeat a little bit / borrow, but I do think like here there's something about like she is the luxury, and like that a little bit of this song to me is like, yes, the loneliness, yes, the trapping, whatever. But what's so interesting is like Elizabeth Taylor is the representation, whereas like in Bejeweled, the jewels were the representation, or in your song, Jody, like the representation,
The $1 million
was, like,
couch.
right, or the upper class circles or whatever. It was just interesting.
I think we know a lot more about her life, and I think she lived a luxurious life, and so it's not necessarily like Elizabeth Taylor, it's the Elizabeth Taylor life that is luxury.
Sure,
and so
but like
she
in the
becomes
song, like the metaphor is Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor
so-
is the metaphor and her
yeah.
life of luxury.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, and this is a broader statement, that The Life of a Showgirl as an album has a lot of changing your fate, where historically Taylor Swift has done a lot of songs about like fate and wanting things to just fall into place, and the prophecy from Tortured Poets about like, I'm just stuck in this, change the prophecy. And Life of a Showgirl is a lot of taking, here's a story and we're gonna flip it and it's good and happy now. We talked about that in our Fate of Ophelia deep dive. And here too, the fact that there is a clear parallel between Elizabeth Taylor and Taylor Swift in their lives and the way that they were / are treated as commodities. I just think it's really interesting to consider this in the context of her saying so clearly, so iconically in that interview that your energy is a luxury that not everyone can afford. She says things like, my name can be in a headline and it can be none of my business. And so just from that point of view, this song might be playing a bit with like, how can I avoid a little bit the fate of Elizabeth Taylor? Not that it was her fault, but what are boundaries I can set up? What are things I can set up? So maybe this song is poking fun at the trappings of luxury to say like, yeah, sure, I have all this stuff, but like, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna learn from the women that came before me and see what I can do about it and see how I can not get lost in the luxury. Not to say Elizabeth Taylor did, but just, there's a clear look back on the entirety of The Life of a Showgirl, where she's looking back and learning lessons and making changes. And some of those are looking back at her own life, but there's clearly looking back at other historical things like a Shakespeare play or Elizabeth Taylor. And I just think that's really interesting that she's talked about luxury, but from her own mouth, the thing that was luxurious was her energy. That is something that she treats as a luxury, that she treats as expensive and special. And then to get this song on this album where all this luxurious things are kind of like, is this tongue in cheek? Does this matter? Does it not matter? We don't really know. I just think there's a lot of playing around here with learning lessons, defining what a luxury is, navigating this lifestyle. All of that is here, which I think we'll get more into in the deep dive. But like this song, clearly, we say luxury, sure, but it's everything we've said is clearly is the cornerstone of the song.
Love that. And if you loved this conversation, definitely tune in next week.
This is the most we've tiptoed into a deep dive before. We just couldn't help ourselves.
I'm so excited to be deep diving this song. It's going to be fun.
I know, me too. All right, well, catch us next week as we deep dive Elizabeth Taylor right here on AP Taylor Swift.
That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift.
Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us across socials at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date.
Join us next time as we overanalyze the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.